first and arguably most important tip I have in this whole video is checking people who go to the corner with a side light. As we see here, side light is very fast, hard to react to, right? It also hits from super far away. I mean, look, with a dash, I basically cover half the stage, right? So the whole logic behind this tip is that when you approach someone in Brawlhalla, a lot of times, if my opponent is here, they'll like to give up space and run away towards the corner because they feel safer like that, right? So you can read this movement by doing a dash side light just because it's so fast and long range. Not to mention, it leads to a confirmed side light sair now, so you can use this to build up damage and KO in later healths. But not everyone, when you approach them, will actually stay on the ground. A lot of people will like to panic jump away from you, and you can read this by just walking up to them and literally just doing a jump sair. By the way, I don't mean dash jump sair. Dash jump sair is a much more higher commitment because you're throwing yourself at your opponent, and if you miss, you can be punished. Walk up to them, jump sair to read the jump. This, in combination with just a regular side light, is very oppressive for people who like to play in the corner a lot. It's kind of hard to simulate in the training room, but let's just use our imagination. I throw someone off stage, I can really just keep chasing them down with a bunch of jump sairs. Because of how long the move is, it's very hard to be punished. So you can lead to a lot of early kills or early gimps with jump sairs off stage. The Blaster's advantage state is really good because of these long moves like side light and sair. Once you land the first hit, you can really just keep pressuring them from super far away, right? But the neutral game is a little bit difficult because a lot of players, when fighting against Blasters, will kind of like to smother you like this, move all over you, which makes it difficult, right? Because you have a lot of huge dead zones. Another thing that's really difficult for a lot of low elo Blasters players is people who hang out around this area, like 1 to 2 jump heights above you, because as we see here, none of the grounded moves cover from there, right? So I need to commit to something a lot bigger. Some pro players, like Stingray, for example, like to talk about using a jump fastfall nair to cover this area right above you. But personally, in my experience, and I'm sure this works in pro gameplay, as for someone who's not a pro and very far from being a pro, this is a huge call out. I find this very difficult to land because you kind of really need to hard read them being in the air before you do it. Let's say, for example, I misjudge the situation. I do a jump fastfall nair and they're on the ground. Instead, they fastfall to the ground. There's no extra movement with the nair. I'm locked in these recovery frames. I can't drift out of it. So I'm going to get punished here, right? For sure. Personally, I like to just reposition altogether rather than staying with them, stacked with them, try to move away from them and look for a jump sair. Not to mention, you can also do something like a dash jump reverse sair. I don't know if people call this a fadeaway sair. That's how I refer to it as, but this dash jump reverse sair is really, really strong for throwing out a hitbox, covering the 1 to 2 jump height area, and simultaneously repositioning. One more tip I have is actually for people, if you're fighting someone who likes to burn their dodge a lot in neutral. For example, this is very common when your opponent is moving all over you and they do something like a dash jump, dodge up like that, or they move towards you and then they try to dodge through you like that. If someone burns their dodge a lot in neutral, all you have to do is look for a jump dair, because for example, let's say you catch the dodge, that leads to a lot of confirmed damage. Now the next tip I have is about GC dlight. Now this is decently high risk, like with any GC move, if you're burning your dodge in the air, if you're fighting a string weapon, you're going to get punished really hard if you do it in a bad situation. If you do it in the right position, it's pretty easy to just like jump out of this. You can either jump out of it, you can either fall to the ground and dash out of it. If someone tries to punish you by going directly at you, they're going to just run into the dlight and they're going to get hit by it, right? So they would have to go around you, right? Or have a really long move like a bow dlight to be able to punish you in the first place. But the actual use case for GC dlight goes as follows. GC dlight is really good for catching people who, when you approach them, they either do nothing, they stand still, they spot dodge, right? It has a lot of active frames, so it'll catch the spot dodge. It'll also catch people who jump, and I go in for a GC dlight like that, it'll catch them there. But the most important one to know about this GC dlight is it's really good for catching cross-ups. As I said before, a lot of Blasters players like to jump all over the place around you. So when you approach them, a lot of times they'll try to move past you, right? Do a GC and in the opposite direction to catch them going around you. Now, Blasters has a lot of 50-50s, and by 50-50s, I mean like 50-50 situations where after you hit someone, there's only like 1 of 2 ways a lot of times that they'll like to go. For example, after you hit a dair, a lot of players will either move left or right, and you can just read this with a sair. For example, if I hit a dair here and they just stay under me, I just look for another dair, which leads to a lot of confirmed damage. So a lot of players will like to move left or right. For example, if they move right, all I have to do is read it with a sair. After the sair, it leads to another 50-50. They either do nothing, and they'll get hit with a side light, which I'll show in a second. But if I do the sair and they jump afterwards, I read this with an X pivot nair. If they move left, I can do a sair going to the left, right? And as we see here, if they don't jump afterwards, something that looks like that. So just to recap, after the dair, you can either read them going left or right, and after the sair, you either sidelight sair, or you read the jump and go for an X pivot nair like that. Now nair has a similar 50-50 where you can read them going left or right with either a GC sidelight like this, they fall into it like this, or you can read them with a jump sair like that, which is really good for just killing by itself. In a lot of high-level Blasters gameplay, the GC sidelight is a really good read because, as we see here, if they do nothing and they just kind of stand still, they keep just getting hit by nairs and no one wants to get hit by that. And a lot of times you can read a fastball with a dair like that, right? That's a pretty common read, but in my experience, as the players start to get better, a lot of them won't immediately fast fall because fast falling out of hit stun is kind of a bad habit after they're hit by a nair. And if you hit this GC sidelight like this, it allows you to get a confirmed chase dodge forward reverse nair. Hitting a confirmed nair like that is good because it sends them back upwards, right? And it continues the juggle. And not to mention, if you hit them with this, you can also go for a chase dodge recovery, GC sidelight chase dodge recovery. This will kill super, super early. Now, as for some other tips for the grounded kit, as we see here, dlight hits really close. Well, not really close, but it hits closer than sidelight, okay? So while sidelight is really good for aggressing people and pushing them when they're in the corner, right, in your advantage state, you see here how dlight hits twice, has a lot of active frames, so it's actually good for catching spot dodges. For example, this is especially good if your opponent has been getting hit by a dash sidelight this whole match. The moment you approach them, they might be scared, and rather than jumping or doing nothing, they're going to try and spot dodge, right? So to catch the spot dodge, what you can do is dash up to them and end them, because the move hits twice. Not to mention, you get a lot of confirmed damage. Like, you can get a dlight into a reverse nair, which leads into the whole juggle situation, like I said before. I guess, yeah, technically you could walk up to them and look for a dlight if you're expecting them to spot dodge. But in my opinion, dlight, I mean, like, low-key, it's kind of a bad move. I mean, yeah, you can wake up immediately after a dlight, but that's not really the point. Just because it has low recovery frames doesn't mean it's not punishable. For example, if I do a dlight, I'm stuck in frames this entire time. So all my opponent has to do is float above me. And chances are, if they're fighting against blasters, they're probably going to be floating around me anyway. Dlight is not the same as GC dlight. You don't have access to the same options. Like, for example, with a GC dlight, you can read so many options on the corner like this. You can read them going around you with a cross-up. But regular dlight doesn't really have access to any of that. You should really just be using dlight to dash in for a punish. Like, for example, if I were the sword player, you can kind of do the same thing like how sword players dash in for a dash dlight punish. Go in for a dash dlight like this. Some other tips I have are that nair offstage makes it really hard to be edge guarded. For example, if I reverse the nair like this, as we see here, the first hitbox that comes out is the one that comes out behind you. So you can use this to catch people on the ledge, and if you hit them with this is basically like a free return back to stage. Another way that you can recover from the wall, for example, is you do a jump sair like this. A lot of players know this, but actually you should be very careful because, in my experience, a lot of lesser experienced Blasters players will like to do this jump sair way too much. Jump sair hits when your opponent is here, right? But if your opponent is all the way over here, there's no need to go for this. You see here, I'm like in a perfect position to be punished. So rather than going for this jump sair, I would rather just recover high, or, you know, remember, you can also throw your weapon too, right? There's so many ways to recover rather than spamming this jump sair. Now, one last thing I wanted to talk about is doing pickup recovery to kill. This is a little bit less important nowadays in modern Brawlhalla because sidelight sair is true, right? So you don't really have as much trouble killing as you did before. Before, you would have to look for a dlight to get your true kill confirm. But it doesn't hurt to mix in a pickup recovery, which is like you kind of hug them, float around them, look for recovery. If they're jumping, this catches them too because you go like that. But remember, in general, if your opponent is constantly jumping like this, I would still rather just go for a jump sair. I like to say the pickup recovery as just another mix-up option you can add to your arsenal. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and also thank you to my friend Hoziie for helping me write the script for this video. He's a 2600 player, so needless to say, he's like a lot better than me, right? But more importantly than that, he's also just a great human being and a great friend. He sat in a VC with me for a very long time talking about like these advanced blasters techs and also some other techs that we'll be seeing in future videos, right? So if you learned something, make sure to thank him in the comments below. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.